Sure. If we could just get all of the panelists to join us up front. We're going to go through this quickly. We're only going to introduce the panelists, well, those who haven't presented. You're going to introduce yourselves, and then we'll just jump right into it. It's a big group of people who all look similar. A lot of homogeneity here. All right. Perhaps if we can start with, Mark, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Mark Cooper. I'm the president and CEO of the Saskatchewan Construction Association. We represent the non-residential construction companies in the province, of which there's around 9,000.
Nice, thank you. And I'll hand this off to Mike and then Scott. You guys can introduce yourselves.
My name is Mike Zarowski, PCL Construction Management. Lots of experience, I guess, last couple of years building a facility on Elphinstone Street, a small football stadium, so enjoyed using BIM modeling on that job, so I'll try and share my experience there.
My name is Scott McDonald. I'm an account executive at Imaginet Technologies, and experience with BIM is a little bit more on the, I was a CAD manager out for Curtain Wall Company, so have some crossover experience between manufacturing and architecture. So.
All right, so we're just going to share the microphones as we go. It's going to be quite informal. I'm going to put out a couple questions. If you have thoughts on it, I'd like you to just go ahead. And if nobody volunteers to answer, I'll start picking people. Like a teacher, I might not be the most polite, though. I taught in an unregulated industry in Asia for a number of years. And we will have time for audience questions. So if you guys have had questions, you've been sitting on some, we will make some time for that. And if nobody asks questions, we'd like to ask Peter to start asking them for us, too. Or Pietro, sorry. But yeah, just gonna jump in. We've heard a lot. There's a lot of variety of topics, variety of experience here. Just want to build off if anybody thinks about. We've heard a lot of the best case scenarios, the IDP projects or projects where we had a lot of things that enabled BIM. In the traditional design bid build world, does that enable us to do BIM? Will that allow you to do the process properly, or is it a big hindrance on that? Troy's smiling, caught your eye.
Sorry. It's tricky. Design bid build does not foster a collaborative process. And I think one of the strengths of truly using BIM to its fullest degree is collaboration. And we as consultants, architects, engineers, will use the tool regardless of the, as I said earlier, we haven't used AutoCAD in our office in Saskatoon probably since like we started here in 2010. We don't try not to use AutoCAD, but does that mean that we can then push it further into the construction process? Well, that really depends on the contractor. It depends on the subtrades. It depends on a whole bunch of factors. So it's definitely harder to leverage the full capacity of BIM in a design bid build environment. So.
I'll maybe talk a little bit to construction. So we see a lot of value in BIM, even in that type of contract model. It allows us to really simplify the information when it gets down to the site and to the workforce, where we can develop 3D images, 3D work packages from the packages we get through the bid process. But essentially, it's a communication tool for us, and we communicate with our trades and with the site forces, and it makes for the build to be done right the first time, so a higher quality product at the end of the day.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just build on what Mike said. I think it's still for us a huge asset on the design side as we're communicating and collaborating with our clients. To be able to work in that three-dimensional model is a huge asset for us. And then, as Mike said, when we hand that off, we have a greater degree of confidence that the QA/QC process the trades are going to go through when they have access to a three-dimensional model to build from is a huge benefit. Is it fully effective? Is it leveraging the tool to its full extent? Probably not. But is there still value there? Absolutely, there is.
Okay, thank you guys. I also want to talk about, so there's a lot of conversation about, we've had conversation of things happening in Saskatchewan, some of the projects that have happened here, but also a lot about things that have been done other places and bringing them here. We touched a bit on the challenges of that. But what I'd like to get your perspective on is, what does that do to our workforce or our built environment or the competitive landscape in Saskatchewan with new trade agreements and new competition facing Saskatchewan firms? What impact does not further adopting these technologies when they're fully adopted in other regions have on our workforce? What, for the students in the room here today that are you guys are at that point where everything is great, the world is awesome, it all works well together. I remember being there. I actually kind of live in that world, so a little perspective. I don't actually do anything when it comes to putting a building together. I just go out and talk to people. I work with a vendor that, this isn't trying to be a sales pitch, but I work with a group that gives tools, helps do training, consulting. We have access to experts. So my conversations with people in the industry are generally often a little bit more theoretical. When we get into the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of how the things work, I'm in that position where we're able to go, this is the way it should work, and allow people to just go and do that. But when we get into it, for those that have either been on projects or in government, how do you feel that affects our future workforce if other groups are able to be coming in and be more efficient and bringing more value adds to a project, whereas our local companies aren't?
If I might. First of all, I think it's so important that we have the intelligence at the beginning of work. One of the great challenges is so often people don't understand what the nature of their problem is or their challenge or what they're trying to accomplish. What we need is the education, the tools, the mechanisms that allow us to understand our circumstances better and better and better. That's particularly true as the market becomes more open, accessible through things such as trade agreements. We need to develop the skills and understandings and have those supports so that we really do have a handle on projects or initiatives. What we've seen is it's so important for our own firms to be able to be competitive, be in front, because if you don't, people from somewhere else will come in with those capabilities. So yes, for better for worse, we have to be ready to compete with anyone, anywhere. Having said that though, we have really great firms here. We really, really do. What we need to do is encourage people to continue to be really excellent. That means making sure that how we approach things and conceive of things recognizes the tremendous talent we have available to us and doesn't discourage them from participating.
I'd like to put a positive spin on Saskatchewan and living and working in Saskatchewan. I think Saskatchewan has always been an ideal incubator for business. We've taken the leads in many areas, all of which many are familiar with. The first integrated project delivery in Canada was in Moose Jaw with a Saskatchewan group of companies. I dare say that best value procurement is not being implemented and recognized to the degree to which it is here in Saskatchewan. We have an education system here in the province that is actually a catalyst to further development within consulting firms and construction firms, graduating young folks that come with skill sets that enable old practitioners like myself to not only adopt tool sets, but have people that can work with those tool sets. Now, the game is really how we stay ahead of the wave we have in the past, and I think we're an ideal incubator to try different things. I was having a conversation at the break about integrated project delivery, and in my mind, it's a whole lot better than the old traditional design, bid, build process. My concern really was the scalability. That is, small province, smaller budgets. We don't have multi-million-dollar projects happening all the time. And can we scale IPD project delivery, which is, I think, a great form of best value down to smaller projects. And Troy informs me that, and Rory, that it's very doable. So I'd like to take the positive aspects of the province, where we've been, where we're going, and continue to leverage that opportunity. I think it's there, and it's just up to all of us, students, professionals alike, to seize the opportunity.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin on the question about competitiveness. So we're in a real people-oriented industry. Like we always say in our firm that people are our number one resource, and to engage the younger staff, the expectations changed with our younger staff that they really want the most current technology out there. And we want to attract the youngest, best staff, so we want to give them the tools to be able to succeed in their careers. And whether it's BIM technology or programs or even the newest gadget, it seems to be an attraction for a lot of our youth today. So it helps make us a bit more competitive, because we're trying to attract the best that are out there. So.
All right. Any questions from the audience about anything you've heard here today?
Do you find that the smaller projects drive you back to AutoCAD, or do you find that you're able to, once you switch to BIM, go continuously on that road?
Hang on to it for a sec, just in case.
So I'll take this one. I walked into my office, Dale, when was it? I don't know. 2005, 2006, and announced to the group there, much to their anxiety, that we were going to become a Revit-based production platform. We were going to 3D. AutoCAD was going to be a thing of the past. And I gave them 10 months to get to where 85% of our work was being produced in Revit. And almost all of them freaked out. Because we were an AutoCAD-based practice. That's what we were. We were a CAD-based enterprise. A year later, I don't think any of our staff would have gone back to AutoCAD as a production platform, because of all of the embedded smart technology in Revit, in BIM-based modeling, made their world so much easier, much more interesting. When we go back to AutoCAD, it's based on client demand, which is... No, they're catching up. They're getting to where we are now, where we were then. And like Troy's office, I don't think that we would accept CAD-based production. Maybe on a specialty service where it's not sensible to model something. Where we get pushback is from clients who aren't ready to actually accept a model and use it to the benefit it can bring. And that probably is where we need to get to next, is having a client base, here in the province, that has access to the tools and the resources to be able to use the information in the models that we're providing to their best benefit. Because as was said, design and construction in the total capital expenditure of a project or a facility is a small percentage. I don't know what it is. Architects will tell you it's 1%, and contractors will tell you it's 31%, and owners will tell you it's 101% because they don't want to pay us for any of it. But it's just, it is what it is. It's a small investment. When we do these buildings that are lasting 100 years, the couple of years that we're in a BIM model is insignificant. How they use that in the long term is significant and is where real value can be found.
We, not long ago, did a Dairy Queen project, tenant improvement for a client. And Dairy Queen provided a whole series of drawings in AutoCAD that we were essentially supposed to replicate. And we thought, okay, this will be the most efficient way of doing it by just reusing some of their drawings, supplementing, all those sorts of things. It didn't help us save any time whatsoever. Because all of our staff are used to using Revit, so we were taking essentially a step backwards to try and put everybody back into the AutoCAD world and then try and do something we thought was going to be efficient. It wasn't remotely efficient because, as Roy noted, once people use Revit and they use it for a period of time, they honestly, they don't want to take a step backwards, which is what most of our technologists or architects, those people don't, that's what they feel. They were taking a step backwards. So we really try not to do it if we can. So.
I'm the program head for the engineering design and drafting technology in Moose Jaw. And so we just went through a program revision, and through our external validation, there was much discussion about eliminating AutoCAD and going straight into teaching our students 3D, such as Revit or Inventor, going into Civil 3D earlier on. And we've really kept with it because we found that that 2D is their foundation before they move forward. And so I just kind of wanted to see if you guys are in agreement to that. So we are starting to bring in 3D earlier, but we still have those foundations because they take that. And so I just wanted to get kind of a comment from you guys on whether you agree with that.
Well, one of the things that I always think about is the education of an architect. I would hate to see that we jump into 3D instantaneously. You've got to have an understanding from a 2D perspective. At the end of the day, we still have plans and elevations and sections and those kind of things. And my education, which was a few years ago, we started out with hand drafting as the beginning, then we moved into AutoCAD, then we moved into 3D, because that foundation of that piece is really important. Having said that, I think sometimes we defer back to CAD because it's been the industry standard for so long because it's kind of easier. But again, if you want to be at the forefront of the industry, getting into the 3D world is fundamentally critical. So.
I'll just share, my daughter graduated from your program just a couple of years ago, and her base education in the world of 2D representation of what it is that we're constructing is really important. That I agree with that. In fact, you wish you taught them how to draw by hand a little bit so that they had to think about what they were putting down and not just flipping lines around on a screen. But getting to where industry is, which is really in that BIM world, I think is really important. I think that those students have to come out with at least a familiarity. They're not going to be well versed in all of the components of BIM modeling. And quite frankly, we want to teach them our way because everybody's got a slightly different slant on how we're going to do this and how we're going to be most productive. But they've got to understand the tools. They've got to know the vocabulary. And they've got to be able to produce in a way that they're confident they understand what they're putting down. Because, you know, as I said, electronically flipping lines around on a screen is not all that challenging. But actually producing something that's usable in the industry is incredibly hard. So give them that really good foundation, please.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to a little bit more about, you know, forward thinking and where do we go from here. So just to, you know, frame this a little bit, we've had the conversations where on the design side, we feel like we're advancing fairly well in the use of some of the BIM technology, the different tools available. In certain, excuse me, in certain instances, we've seen great examples of it being used in full-blown construction projects. But we're not there all the way, and we are admittedly behind in certain areas. I'm wondering, I'd like to hear from probably each of the panel members on this one about if you feel there are any factors that uniquely position Saskatchewan to advance on this one. Now, I think that we're, in the BIM environment, there's a high trust environment. There's a lot more sharing going on. There's a lot more information going back and forth that hasn't traditionally been the way we put structures and contract that out. I really think that because of the size of Saskatchewan and the fact that we have a smaller population base, we know the players. I have not been in the industry for a heck of a long time, but I see a lot of familiar faces, and I know that we have a smaller set of people in the industry. And to me, that seems to, whether it's good or bad, you know who you're working with. And that level of trust, and you'll be able to adjust to that. So my thoughts are that our size is an advantage here. And I'd like to hear from the other groups, people, whether there's something uniquely Saskatchewan holding us back, or that would allow us to move forward.
Well, I think it's both, Shane. I think you're correct that in Saskatchewan, the size of the population and the relatively closed nature of the industry means that there's a high value placed on relationship, and so collaboration is extraordinarily possible in ways that it might not be in other marketplaces. And I think that's why, to Kirk's point, we've had the opportunity to have some unique leaps ahead in Saskatchewan. And so I think that's a reality that bodes well. But the flip side of that is that it's a closed group that is reluctant to adopt new practices, right? And I mean, globally, we know that there's a global phenomenon of productivity falling in construction, right? And that is worse in Canada and worse yet in Saskatchewan, where construction as an industry is getting taking more and more to do less and less, and that's concerning. And in part, I think that is because of the reluctance to, and inherent challenges within the industry, which we don't need to get into, but for the adoption of new technology. And I think it's something that as a province we need to wrestle with. It goes back to your original question, or one of your earlier questions around the competitive forces at play and what that might mean for the province. And it's something that Saskatchewan companies need to wrestle with, because we're seeing more and more competition now in this marketplace from companies outside of the province who have the scale and the capacity to compete in this marketplace, even for jobs that would traditionally be below their threshold. And they're winning because they can do these kinds of things. And our marketplace isn't prepared for that as well as it should. That's why, I mean, in Greg's presentation, there was one bullet he had up there about supplier development. It's why there's such a key role for the government to play in supporting supplier development of, in particular, of local firms. And in really charting the course when it comes to technologies like BIM, in terms of saying that this is a marketplace expectation, so that companies here are forced to adopt technologies that otherwise they'd be reluctant to do.
Let's go down the panel.
Let's just go down the line.
Sure, absolutely. I spent 25 years in professional practice here in Saskatchewan. And I spent the last 5 years in different parts of the U.S. market. I spent time in Florida and California. And I don't think there's any place where I've ever worked where there is a collegial kind of attitude and atmosphere as we see here in Saskatchewan. I can call any of my design colleagues, my competitors, and gain information from them, and there's an openness and a willingness to share like there is in no other place that I've ever been. I can phone any contractor in the province and get really good information in ways that I can't anywhere else. I know that, and that's unique to this climate. We also are an incredibly risk-averse place. And so taking that leap to adopt new technologies, to look at new methodologies, is a really unique one-off when it happens in Saskatchewan. And Moose Jaw, was pointed at as one of those really, the perfect storm of change in political climate and change in construction climate that facilitated that happening. Can it happen again? It'll be interesting to see. But I think there's because of the collegial nature of our industry, there's opportunity here.
Yeah, I agree completely with both comments. Personally, I think the stars are aligning, and Rory talks about a perfect storm. Well, there's I don't like using the word storm, but there's an opportunity. There's a window of opportunity here in Saskatchewan that's growing wider than perhaps other jurisdictions. There's a confluence of events, both past and present. New procurement methods that are encouraging a value added. And the notion of teamwork within the construction sector, leading to a best value, connects the dot with integrated project delivery. Can we scale it down to a Saskatchewan scale or not? I'm encouraged by conversations that yes, we can. Well, let's try it out. Let's do it. Let's prove it to the rest of North America that you can scale down a new project delivery approach that will bring best value to the public. So I think it's just recognizing that the stars are aligning, that we could probably connect the dots here better in Saskatchewan than folks can elsewhere in the country or in North America, as Rory alluded to. So, let's seize the moment and leverage this window of opportunity.
I just say there's nothing more beautiful than a prairie storm. So.
Yeah. True.
So I agree completely with Rory's and the other comments so far. I think one of the things that we have is I always liken Saskatchewan to a big small town because everybody knows everybody, and as Rory said, in our industry, I mean, we have 120 registered member architects who basically live in the province. But one of the problems with that is we have over 300 who live outside of the province. So we have a lot of work that goes on in this province that's being done by people from elsewhere. And one of the problems that we have here is we don't have a school of architecture. We have a very strong technology program. We have no school of architecture. So one of the places that I would love to see happen is at the University of Saskatchewan. They've been talking about a school of architecture for many years. We would love to get that off the ground, get the government to get behind it, because it will make a difference in our industry. It'll make a difference in the construction industry, than the design industry, because of that, because hopefully less work then goes outside of the province because we have more professionals in the province who can do the work. When I moved back to Saskatchewan in 2010, our firm, along with one other, was sort of the first new firms, I think, in the city of Saskatoon for maybe 15 years before that. So we haven't had that sort of next generation of professionals to rely upon to start new firms, all those sorts of things. So that is, I think, it's a detriment, but it's also an opportunity. We have the ability, we have the people that are coming back. They get trained elsewhere, then they decide to move back to Saskatchewan. We need to grow and educate some here as well. So.
Thank you. To augment the comments I've made, one of the challenges that we oftentimes face is people confuse, if you like, process and tactics and that with the objectives. One of the things we're seeing, and this is part of the magic of being a smaller community where people are beginning to talk, is people are beginning to focus on what are the issues, what are the underlying challenges and problems and opportunities, and then how may you use, whether it's process or other things, to address it. When you focus just on, for example, procurement, it's not about issuing a tender. It's about solving a business problem. And a well-defined problem then leads you down the right path to whatever technique or tactic or process you need. But if we sort of leap over that stage, what ends up happening is we're solving the wrong problem oftentimes because we're using the wrong process or we're using the wrong mechanisms. And that's part of the advantage I'm seeing here in Saskatchewan is we are small enough we can actually talk to each other. People know each other, and people are showing a great willingness to do so. So I have great hopes for the opportunities to make use of new technologies, new strategies, to build our competitive edge and be successful not only here but elsewhere. Because quite frankly, we want our people succeeding here and then succeeding elsewhere and bringing the cash home here.
I'm going to echo a lot of what's been said, but as you all know, Saskatchewan is a very personable province. The people here are eager to help. You hit the ditch, people will stop. And I think the same is translating into business. Grant even stated that he's eager to share, and that's an attitude that isn't prevalent in other provinces as much as I think it is here. Where I was working in BC, when we'd receive data from an architect, it was either PDF drawings or at best they would take the Revit model and go to the lengths to export out to AutoCAD drawings so that we couldn't take their model and at any point hold them accountable for anything. Troy was talking about efficiency and avoiding rework, and that type of process just doubles the work. You take what they've done, you do it again so that you can do your part of it. And the idea of being eager to share, I think, is going to be a lot more prevalent in a smaller setting such as Saskatchewan.
So Rory was talking a bit about contractors and subcontractors kind of being behind, and I fully agree with you, Rory. It's I think in our community we're a bit reluctant to change, for one. We'll call ourselves a bit traditional, but at the same time, we see a lot of positive change. Like we heard a lot of talk today about not low price. And I had a discussion earlier today about BIM. And if I put myself in the shoes of a small business owner in the construction industry, and we're going to mandate BIM on our subcontractors or on some other generals, they now have to hire or they have to buy the technology and stuff like that, which at times can be cost prohibitive for a small company. So to hear that there's change through what we heard today about, it's not low bidder, it's kind of a point system, I think is going to go a long ways for bringing that technology forward. But it's going to be a challenge for a while, I think, still just with the way our structure is, and when you're dealing with small business, it's a big change. It will take time, but these small changes will help. So,
Thank you all. It comes to the last kind of question or topic, and we've got a lot of students in the room that are going to be entering the industry in a relatively near future. Any quick tidbits, pointers for those, especially those who are hiring or traditionally employ the folks? Anything real quick before we wrap up and get to the beverages portion of the evening?
Rory Rory's getting a lot of kudos tonight, but I worked for Rory 20 years ago, and he learned how to draft with both hands. So I used to watch him draft with both hands. So there's something to be said for somebody that can do that and understand how things get assembled. So listen to, I don't know if Greg Wheeler's still teaching construction. He's an important guy. The other part of it is just learn to communicate. Like we are a people industry, and you can't sit behind a computer all day. You got to have discussions. You got to be talking, and you solve a lot of problems just through discussion. So communication is very big in our world. So don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, I think I agree wholeheartedly. I think communication is so critical, and it's all well and good to know how to model something, but do you understand actually how it goes together? Number one. Number two, if you had to write an email to a client to explain it, can you do that? Those are critical pieces in our industry, because the drawing, the modeling side is one part of it, but there's so many other parts to it that I think as future workers in the industry, that we need to make sure those pieces are up to the same level.
I'm just going to add a comment around how important what we do is. I think we underestimate and we undervalue the impact as an industry that we have on people's lives every day. When we put up a new building, we change the environment forever. We change the paths people take forever. We change the lives of people that interact with that building forever. So don't for a second think that you're just producing documents, you're just drawing, you're just a technologist. You're changing people's lives, and you're making this place, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Regina, I call Saskatoon home, a better place forever. So don't undervalue that for a second.
Thank you all. What I heard there is communication is a big deal. That's a theme that we've had. So even though we've got all the tools and technology and toys and things to share information, don't forget about those soft skills, those writing skills, those being able to communicate, because that will separate you from different folks. If you want to be different from your classmates, you need to be technically proficient, but those soft skills are just as important as they were 20, 30 years ago. And at that, I'd like to thank all the panelists. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out. I'll hand it back to Pietro to close us off. And again, thank you for helping us out here.